My family tried to steal my 1.2 million inherited lake house for my pregnant sister, so I sold it in secret and let them walk into the trap. The moment I remember most clearly isn't the sheriff's cruiser coming up the gravel drive or my sister's face going white in front of 2,000 strangers on a live stream. It's quieter than that. It's my father sliding a brass key into a lock that no longer had anything to do with him, the soft mechanical click of it, and the way he pushed the door open with the easy confidence of a man who believes the world still belongs to him, right up until the second it doesn't. 90 people in black tie turned to stare. A string quartet went silent mid-note. And my sister Brianna, 27 weeks pregnant and already lived to 300 viewers, said, "You guys, we're finally here," before the smile dissolved off her face like sugar in the rain. I was standing in the back of the room with my Canon R5 raised, and I was already shooting. I want to be precise about what it felt like. Not giddy, not triumphant. More like watching a very long equation finally resolve. All those months of documented calls, logged emails, cold legal strategy, collapsing into a single, clean answer. My name is Valerie. I'm 31 years old. I'm a professional photographer. I'm single, and according to my family, that combination of facts meant I had no legitimate claim to anything I'd built or been given. They were wrong, and I'd spent 3 months engineering the exact moment they'd find that out. Let me back up. Part 1. What Aunt Beatrice saw. My Aunt Beatrice was my father's older sister, and she was the kind of woman who noticed everything and said very little until she had decided exactly what she thought. She was 74 when she died. She'd been a watercolor painter her whole life, never famous, never trying to be, and she owned a lakefront property in northern Wisconsin that she'd bought for $40,000 in 1987, and which, by the time she passed, was worth somewhere between $1 and $1.3 million depending on who you asked and how much they wanted the number to hurt. I started visiting her when I was 23. No particular reason. I'd just gotten my first real camera, a secondhand Nikon that I'd saved up for over 7 months working double shifts at a coffee shop, and someone had mentioned the light over the lake in the early morning was something worth photographing. They were right. The first time I drove up there, 4 hours from Chicago alone in a Honda Civic that made a sound like a dying lawnmower every time I hit 60, Aunt Beatrice opened the door, looked at me for a long moment and said, "You've got your grandmother's eyes. Come in." I made soup. That was the beginning. For 8 years, I drove up almost every weekend I could manage. The Civic eventually gave out, and I replaced it with a used Subaru. My photography business grew from girl with a camera at weddings to a legitimate commercial operation with roster clients, and I shot a lot of it on that lake. The morning fog, the ice in February, the way the water turned the color of a peach at golden hour while Aunt Beatrice sat on the deck with her watercolors, and we talked. We talked about real things. Not weather, not family gossip. About what we regretted and what we didn't. About what it felt like to make something with your hands. About loneliness and independence and what you owe the people who made you versus what you owe yourself. She watched me build my business from nothing. She knew what I'd sacrificed. She knew about the years of instant noodles in my drafty Pilsen apartment, the unpaid invoices I'd eaten to keep clients happy, the wedding I'd shot 3 days after I had my wisdom teeth out because I couldn't afford to cancel. She also watched Brianna. My sister is 2 years younger than me and has a talent I genuinely respect. She has never, not once in her adult life, made anything harder than it needed to be. Our parents paid for her college, her wedding, both of her cars. When she needed a career, she became a lifestyle influencer, which, to give her credit, suited her perfectly. She had 20,000 followers on Instagram who believed she lived a charmed, soft-focused life full of linen tablecloths and farmers' market flowers. She visited Aunt Beatrice's lake house exactly once. In the summer, I was 26. She spent 45 minutes complaining about the Wi-Fi. She took 17 selfies on the dock with the lake as backdrop, posted them with the caption "Summer Magic" and approximately zero mention of whose property she was on, then left before dinner. Aunt Beatrice watched her go from the kitchen window. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Part 2. The will, the video, and the emails. Aunt Beatrice died on a Tuesday in March. I'd been there the week before, and she'd seemed tired but clear-eyed. We'd sat on the deck even though it was cold enough to see our breath, wrapped in quilts. And she'd said, "You know what I like about you, Val? You showed up. That's the whole thing. That's all it ever is." I didn't know those were almost the last words she'd say to me. I got the call that Tuesday at 6:15 a.m. I was in my car before I'd finished processing it. The will reading happened 3 weeks later, conducted by her attorney, a cautious, careful man named Robert Fenn, who had handled Beatrice's affairs for over a decade. My parents sat across from me at a conference table in Wausau. My mother had worn her good blazer. Brianna had come too, though she wasn't named in anything, and she kept checking her phone under the table. Robert Fenn read the will, the lake house, the property, the contents, and the remainder of Beatrice's investment accounts, to me, Valerie Ann Marsh, in full. My mother's jaw dropped. I watched it happen, physically drop, like a counterweight had been cut. Then Robert Fenn cleared his throat and said there was also a video. Beatrice had recorded it the morning she died, on her iPad, propped against her coffee mug on the kitchen table. She was in her housecoat. Her hair wasn't done. She looked directly into the camera like she was talking to each of us personally. She said, "Valerie showed up. Every week, for 8 years, she showed up. This house is hers. End of story." 7 sentences. The way she said end of story, flat, final, with zero apology. I've watched that video maybe 40 times since, and it still puts a lump in my throat the size of a fist. My mother was vibrating by the time the playback ended. She kept it together together long enough to get to the parking lot. The email started that same night. Here's what I need you to understand about the email campaign my mother ran over the next 6 weeks. It was organized. She wasn't just venting. She was building a case. Twins are expensive, Valerie. You know Brianna is having twins. You're always traveling. You don't even use the property consistently. Brianna needs stability. You're single. You don't have children. You don't need it the way she does. Selfish isn't a strong enough word for what you're doing. Aunt Beatrice was lonely, and you took advantage of that. A real sister wouldn't even hesitate. You don't need it. I didn't argue back. Not once. I opened a Google Sheet on day 3 and started logging every contact. Date, time, medium, word-for-word content, and a notes column. By the end of week 6, I had documented 47 phone calls, recorded through a call logging app on my phone, fully legal in my state as a one-party consent jurisdiction, transcribed, timestamped, filed in a folder I labeled simply documentation. The word selfish appeared 31 times across calls and emails. The phrase you don't need it appeared 43 times. The phrase single girl appeared 19 times. My mother's preferred framing for why my life was worth less than Brianna's. On call number 31, my mother said, and I quote from the transcript, "I will find a way to contest that will. Don't think I won't. Robert Fenn is 100 years old and Beatrice wasn't well. We'll say she was coerced." I let her finish. Then I called Robert Fenn and told him everything. Robert Fenn, who had practiced estate law in Wisconsin for 38 years, was not alarmed. He was, if anything, mildly annoyed. He told me the video recording, combined with Beatrice's documented mental competency, she'd had a cognitive assessment just 5 months earlier, made any contest frivolous. He also told me, carefully, that making a false claim of undue influence against a deceased person's clearly stated wishes could have professional consequences for someone who, say, held a real estate license. My mother held a real estate license. I wrote that down. Part 3. Julian. Julian Ashworth came into my life professionally about 4 years ago when I shot the redesign reveal for one of his architectural projects, a converted warehouse near the Milwaukee riverfront that had won 3 regional design awards by the following year. Julian is in his late 50s, silver-haired, and operates in that zone of wealth where he doesn't feel the need to perform it. He wears the same brand of Italian loafer to site visits and charity galas. He speaks in complete sentences and means every word of them. He had grown up in a family with enough old money that he'd never had to hustle, but he'd spent 30 years building his own firm anyway, because he said inherited wealth without personal achievement felt like wearing someone else's suit. I liked him immediately. I'd photographed his projects a dozen times over 4 years. He knew my work. He'd been to the lake once with a small group of architects and designers I'd invited for a late summer shoot, and he'd stood on the deck looking out at the water for a very long time without saying anything. I called him on a Thursday morning in late August, about 6 weeks after the will reading. I told him the situation. I told him I wanted to sell. There was a pause. "What are you asking?" "I had it appraised," I said. "Fair market puts it between $1.1 and $1.3 million. I want clean and fast." Another pause. Then, "Sell it to me. Cash. 1 week. Clean." We closed in 9 days for $122 million. His corporate lawyer, a woman named Diana Voss, a former assistant U.S. attorney who had moved into private practice and whose reputation in Wisconsin legal circles was, as Julian described her, she eats opposing counsel for sport, handled all of it. Diana Voss, J.D., University of Chicago, 14 years in private practice after 6 years federal. She was 51, 3 inches shorter than me, and had a way of standing perfectly still while other people talked that made you feel like you were already losing. She reviewed the title, confirmed there were no grounds for a contest given the airtight estate documentation, and processed the transfer. I signed the closing paperwork on a Wednesday afternoon. I did not tell my family. I did not change the locks. My father had a spare key. I had given it to him 2 years earlier when I was doing renovation work and needed someone to check on the contractor. He still had it. I knew he still had it because my mother had referenced Dad's key in one of her emails. I left that key exactly where it was, because Julian was planning an event. Part 4. The banquet. Every November, Julian's firm hosted what they called an acquisition preview, essentially a high-end cocktail reception and dinner for the architects, designers, city planning officials, and real estate investors who made up his professional ecosystem. 90 people, roughly. The kind of gathering where deals got made over champagne and you didn't talk about money directly because you didn't have to. He'd been doing it in Chicago for years. This year, he wanted to do it at the Lake House, his new property acquisition, he said, which he wanted to debut to the right audience before beginning its renovation into a boutique client retreat. The date was set for November 15th. 8 HD security cameras were going in, 3 exterior, 5 interior. Diana Voss would be there because Diana Voss was always at Julian's major professional events. A full catering staff, a string quartet, the works, formal attire. I was hired, officially and contractually, as the event photographer. I mentioned this to my family in the vaguest possible terms, that I was working an event up that way in November. Might be a long day. Then I watched what Brianna was doing online. She had been posting nursery content for weeks. Mood boards, paint swatches. The twins' announcement had gotten her 20,000 new followers. She was at a content peak, and she was milking it. The aesthetic young mother, the woman manifesting her dream home, and increasingly, the lake house. She'd never actually told her followers she owned it. She'd never exactly said it was hers, but she'd been posting throwback photos of the deck, of the dock, of Beatrice's old porch chair chairs. She'd let the implication gather like fog. In her comments, people wrote, "Your lake house is stunning," and she liked every single one. In early October, she texted me, "Hey, working on some content, just need the Wi-Fi password for the house when we come up. Mom has the spare key situation handled but need the network name." My thumbs hovered over the phone for a long moment. "I don't have that handy," I typed. "I'll have to dig it up." Then, 12 days later, Val, doing a surprise live home tour, November 15th. My followers have been asking forever. So excited, can't wait to show the twins' future nursery. November 15th, the exact day of Julian's banquet. I put my phone down on the kitchen table and sat with it for a long time. Then I texted back, "Sounds fun." I didn't mention it to Julian. I didn't need to. I just confirmed my arrival time, double-checked the security camera setup, and went back to work. Part 5. Diana Voss makes a phone call. About a week before the event, I sat down with Diana Voss over coffee at a downtown Milwaukee hotel and laid everything out. The documentation folder. All 47 calls. The transcripts. The email chain. The specific threat to contest the will using fabricated claims of coercion. The detail about my mother's real estate license. Diana listened without interrupting. She had a yellow legal pad and she took 4 lines of notes, which felt like exactly the right amount. "You anticipated trespassing," she said when I finished. "I anticipated them using an old key and treating the property as theirs. And you want to be present. I'm the event photographer. I'll be there professionally regardless." She looked at me for a moment. "Ms. Marsh, you've done good work here." She tapped the documentation folder. "This is better than most of what my own clients bring me. You have recorded evidence of a stated intention to make false legal claims. Depending on how November 15th goes, you may have grounds to pursue more than just a trespass call." "I know," I said. "I'll have someone look into the license situation." She had already made a call to the Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Services, the body that oversees real estate licensing in the state, by the time I was back in my car. I know this because she texted me a case file number that afternoon. My mother's real estate license was already under preliminary review for alleged misrepresentation in a separate transaction that a former client had reported months earlier. Diana's call had added context to an existing file. My mother didn't know any of this. She was busy planning her daughter's nursery reveal. Part 6. November 15th. I arrived at 10 a.m. to help with setup. The catering company had come in at 8. White-clothed tables, heavy glassware, trays of canapes under silver domes. The string quartet did a sound check at noon. String lights went up along the deck railing, and the afternoon light off the lake was doing exactly what it always did in November, going copper and low and extraordinary. I shot the empty house first. I always do. There's something about a room before the people arrive that tells you what it really is. This room was warm, beautiful, entirely Julian's now. The art on the walls was his. The furniture was his. Even the Wi-Fi network had been changed. Guests began arriving at 2:15 p.m. By 3 the house was full. 90 people in formal wear, the low hum of professional conversation, champagne going around on trays. Julian was in his element. Diana was there in a black blazer with her champagne untouched, talking to a city planner from Madison. I circulated with my camera, shot the light on the water through the windows, shot Julian at the microphone doing a brief welcome. Standard event photography. At 3:38 p.m., I was on the far side of the room when I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel. I didn't move to the window. I just raised my camera. I heard the car door, then another. Then my father's voice, muffled through the wall. "Here we go. Let me get the lock." The key went in, the click, and the door opened. I want to describe what 90 people in formal wear look like when they go simultaneously and completely silent. It's not the silence of a library. It's something denser. It's the silence of collective surprise that hasn't yet decided what it is. Threat assessment, genuine confusion, pure social horror. My father stood in the doorway in his weekend jacket, brass key still in his hand, looking at a room full of strangers like a man who had opened the wrong door at a hotel and was trying to determine which floor he was on. Behind him, Brianna. Phone raised. Already live. 300 viewers watching the stream. She had worn a cream-colored maternity top, probably for the nursery reveal. Her hair was done. She'd planned this. "You guys," she said to her phone, the automatic warmth of someone who is always performing. "We're finally..." She stopped. Her smile held for about 2 more seconds on pure muscle memory. Then it was gone. The viewer count in her stream, which I could see later in footage, had already started climbing as people started clicking in from her story notification. By the time it cracked 4 figures, she was already in trouble. Julian stepped forward from the center of the room. He lowered the microphone he'd been holding. "He is not a man who raises his voice. He has never needed to. This is my property," he said. Clear. Unhurried. "Do you have documented legal permission to be on the premises?" My father blinked. "This is my daughter's..." "Your daughter sold this property in September," Julian said. "Who are you?" My mother came through the door behind them then. She had worn her good blazer. Same one from the will reading, I noticed. She'd brought reinforcements from somewhere inside herself. Indignation, certainty, the conviction that she was correct, that had never once required evidence. She pointed at Julian. "That house belongs to my daughter," she said. "And I don't know who you are, but you are in the wrong place." The room had not moved. 90 people watching. Not embarrassed watching. Riveted watching. Diana Voss set down her champagne. She crossed the room the way she does everything. Unhurried, final, and held out her card between 2 fingers. Diana Brianna Voss, corporate legal counsel, she said. You are trespassing on privately held corporate property. You have 60 seconds to leave voluntarily before I contact the county sheriff's department. My mother looked at the card. Something shifted in her expression. Something small and cold, like the first crack in a frozen lake. My father was still holding the key. That's when Brianna's phone found me. I was in the back left corner of the room, Canon R5 raised, shooting at a 1/200th of a second, f2.8, ISO 1250. The light was still good. It was all going to be good. Val? Brianna said. Her mic was hot. The whole room heard it. Hi, Brianna, I said. I didn't need to raise my voice much. The room was that quiet. I see you're live streaming your way through a house I sold 3 months ago. Bold choice. The viewer count in her stream hit 18800 in the next 45 seconds. The comments were going faster than anyone could read them. You sold, she started. September 12th, I said. Clean title transfer, cash close. Julian's owned it for 2 months. My mother turned on me. I watched her make the decision in real time. The decision to double down, to attack, because that is always her move when retreat feels like losing. You had no right, she said. Beatrice wasn't in her right mind. We are going to bury you in court, Valerie. Do you understand me? We will contest every page of that will, and I will tell them everything about how you manipulated that woman. I have 47 recorded phone calls, I said, including the one where you said you'd claim coercion. Transcribed, time-stamped, filed. Silence. Actual silence. Even the people nearest the kitchen, who couldn't have heard everything, felt it arrive. Diana was already on her phone. Not dramatically, just quietly, her back half turned. Yes, we have an active trespass situation. Private event, multiple uninvited individuals who've been asked to leave. Brianna's phone was shaking, not from pregnancy, from her hands. Her viewer count hit 2100. Then she dropped the phone. It hit the hardwood floor flat, an awful crack, and the camera landed face up, still broadcasting. The ceiling, the string lights, the edge of the room, chaos in audio. My father's voice getting louder, my mother saying something about lawyers, a stranger asking someone else what was happening, a woman near the back saying quietly, "Oh my God," not unkindly, just as the pure, involuntary utterance of a person watching a disaster unfold. 200-300 viewers watched the ceiling of Julian's lake house for the next 6 minutes. I kept shooting. Somewhere in that room, I heard Julian raise his glass. To firm boundaries, he said. And I'm not embarrassed to admit that I laughed. A real one, short and unplanned, from somewhere deep in my chest where I had been holding my breath for months. Part 7. After the sheriff arrived 22 minutes later, 2 deputies. They were polite and procedural and very, very clear. My father surrendered the key. He did this without argument. That part surprised me, actually. He looked diminished in a way I hadn't expected. Less like a man who had been defeated and more like a man who had just understood, for the first time, what game he'd been playing. My mother did not go quietly. She went the way she does everything, loudly, with grievance, with the certainty of someone who has never been genuinely accountable. She told the deputies she had a right to be there. She told them about Beatrice. She told them Beatrice had been manipulated. She told them she was a licensed real estate professional and she knew her rights. One of the deputies, young woman, maybe 28, the kind of steady quiet that you only get from training or from seeing enough, looked at her and said, "Ma'am, you are not the property owner. You need to come with me." They were issued trespass warnings, documented, and escorted from the property. Brianna left before the deputies arrived. Someone helped her pick up her phone. She didn't say anything else to me. She walked back through the door and down the porch steps with her hand on her stomach, and I watched her go, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. I felt sad, not guilty. There is an important difference, but sad because I had once loved my sister, the way you love someone you grew up next to, and somewhere along the line she had become a stranger wearing a performance of a person, and I didn't know exactly when it happened, and I didn't know if she did either. I photographed that too, not her specifically. The empty doorway, the string light still on over the water, the evening coming in. Julian's event resumed. The string quartet played again. The conversation rebuilt itself the way conversations do after a social catastrophe, carefully at first, then with the extra warmth of shared experience. I shot the rest of the evening. It was a good event. The light off the lake in the last hour before dark was the best light I'd seen up there in years. Epilogue. What happened after the Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Services completed their review of my mother's real estate license 7 weeks later. The preliminary inquiry Diana's call had contributed context to become a full investigation. 3 months after that, her license was suspended pending a formal hearing. I did not pursue this. I didn't need to. I'd provided documentation when asked, and the rest was its own machine. She has not called me since November 15th. My father called once, in January. It was a short call. He said he was sorry. I thanked him for saying it and told him I needed more time. That was honest. I do. Brianna's live stream, the 6 minutes of ceiling footage with the audio chaos underneath, was clipped, shared, and posted across multiple platforms by people who had been watching. It got to about 400,000 views before she deleted the original. The clips were already everywhere by then. She lost about 6,000 followers in the week after. Gained some back. I don't keep track. She sent me a text in December. "I didn't know you'd sold it. Mom told me it was still yours." I read it 3 times. I didn't respond. Not because I was being cruel, but because I genuinely didn't know what to say that would be both true and useful. And I've made a rule for myself not to speak into spaces where there's nothing real to offer yet. The $122 million minus taxes and transaction costs landed in an account I had opened specifically for what I've started calling, only to my myself, only in my head, the Beatrice Fund. Part of it I reinvested in my business. Proper studio space, equipment upgrades, 2 new associate photographers on contract. Part of it went to a down payment on a place of my own. Not a lake house, not yet, but a solid 1-bedroom in a neighborhood I love with good light in the mornings. The rest is sitting, accruing, waiting to become something I haven't decided on yet. But here's what I think about most. In the quiet parts of the day, I think about that deck. The one where Beatrice and I used to sit as the water went gold. She'd have her watercolors. I'd have my camera. We'd be working and not working, making things and watching things, and she'd say whatever she was thinking without preamble or apology, because she was 74 and had decided that life was too short for preamble. You showed up, she'd said. That's the whole thing. That's all it ever is. I don't own that deck anymore. Someone else does. Julian has big plans for it. A client retreat, a gathering space, something that will make it new. But every time I look at one of my photographs from those mornings, the fog on the water, the light going peach, the edge of Beatrice's easel in the corner of the frame, I know that what I have isn't the house. What I have is the proof that she was right. I showed up. I kept showing up. And in the end, that turned out to be the only thing that mattered.